Get out your notebooks and have a bottle of water handy, because Professor Bard Sr. is going to be lecturing today on the first artifact we see chronologically in Indiana Jones, the Cross of Coronado.
Archaeology is the search for fact, not truth. If it's truth you're interested in, Dr. Tyree's philosophy class is right down the hall.
Let's begin with the real history. Francisco Vázquez de Coronado was a well-known Spanish conquistador from the 16th century. He was the second son of a wealthy noble family, which meant while his family's great wealth afforded him many opportunities and a great education, he would not be inheriting any of that wealth due to Spanish law. So, he was forced to set out into the world to make his own fortune. Fortunately, his connections made this relatively easy, as he was close personal friends with a man named Antonio de Mendoza, the son of the Spanish governor of Granada. And in 1535, Antonio would be made the viceroy of New Spain, and he would bring his friend with him. Thus, Francisco Coronado came to the New World, and it was only 3 years later that he would be made the governor of New Galicia, in what is today Western Mexico. It was here, in this role, that Coronado would be made aware of rumors coming out of the north of massive cities full of gold and riches, the 7 golden cities of Cibola. His friend Mendoza heard as well, and being as they were Spanish, Mendoza immediately began setting up an expedition to find these 7 cities and conquer them, and he chose Coronado to lead it. Some sources claim Coronado set off with nearly 2,000 men, consisting of a small corps of 300 Spaniards and hundreds of native Mexican allies. In February of 1540, they made their way out from New Galicia to the north, then northeast, into lands that are now part of the southwestern United States. The lands here were mostly empty, with no sign of the mythical 7 cities being seen until July 1540, when the expedition came across many small pueblo villages in modern-day New Mexico. Coronado immediately set about conquering the settlements, claiming the larger town of Hawiku for his camp and settling in it for a short while. Unfortunately for Coronado, these small villages were nothing like the great 7 cities he was promised, so in fall of the same year, he moved his camp to the banks of the Rio Grande near central New Mexico and sent out 2 scouting parties. One traveled west and discovered the majestic Grand Canyon, becoming the first Europeans to see it. The other roamed up and down the Rio Grande, battling and conquering the local Pueblo villages and tribes as they did so, with running skirmishes and battles lasting for months. Finally, in the winter of 1540, the 2 groups returned and delivered the disappointing news that neither had discovered any cities of gold. That winter was dark in the Coronado camp, with the expedition's leader often brooding about his impending failure. But hope was restored when one of the locals brought forward stories of a city of riches far to the northeast, a city supposedly called Quivira. So in spring of 1541, Coronado set out for the second part of his expedition, to find this city of Quivira and bring back at least something to show for his expedition. His journey took him east, across the Pecos River, and through what is now Texas, then north into what is now Oklahoma. They came across the Great Plains, discovering large herds of buffalo, and accidentally reintroducing horses to the plains for the first time in 10,000 years. Then, they finally arrived in Quivira, in what is today Kansas, and it was once again a disappointment. Coronado's expedition had failed. He had the man who told him of Quivira executed, and then made his way back south into Mexico. By the time Coronado returned to New Galicia in the fall of 1542, his expedition was in sorry shape. Due to desertions, casualties by battle and disease, and a few small groups left behind in the conquered territory, Coronado's party consisted of only 100 men when he arrived home. Even worse for him, Coronado and his friend Antonio Mendoza had sunk quite a lot of their own private fortunes into the expedition, and its failure nearly left Coronado destitute. It also destroyed their friendship, and in 1544, Mendoza removed Coronado as governor of New Galicia. Coronado then retired to Mexico City, where he lived a quiet life as a simple councilman until his death in 1554 at the age of 44. So where does the cross come in, you might be asking? Well, that's the thing. It doesn't. Unlike most other artifacts in the Indiana Jones universe, there is no real-world equivalent to the Cross of Coronado. I mean, as a devout Catholic, there is no doubt that Coronado would have brought crosses with him as prayer implements when he went on his expedition, but it is highly unlikely any of them would have been as ornate as the one shown in the movie. Additionally, the way Indy says Coronado supposedly acquired the cross, being given the cross by Cortez in 1520, would have been impossible, since Coronado would have been 10 at the time and still living in Spain. So, the Cross of Coronado doesn't exist. Except it does, because this is a lore channel, and this is a video about Indiana Jones, one of the best adventure franchises the world has ever seen. Who cares about the facts of our world? Those come second to the facts of the fictional world, the one in which Indiana Jones is set, where Nazis melt like candles and thuggy magic can pull the still beating hearts out of living men. The Cross of Coronado very definitely exists in that world, so all we have to do is determine the most likely way it came to be there. So for the next part of this video, what I'm going to say will consist of a lot of speculation. Speculation supported by fact as best as possible, but not confirmed lore from any kind of source material or anything. Just the extrapolated story of the Cross of Coronado, based on what we do know and what would make the most sense. If you don't like my version, feel free to tell me after the video. But until then, this is my lecture, so pay attention. One more quick note, in the original version of the script for The Last Crusade, the Cross of Coronado was given to Cortez by Moctezuma, so we're going to start there. In 1519, when Cortez arrived in Tenochtitlan, leading a massive army of Moctezuma's enemies, the Aztec king came to greet him in person and exchange gifts. During this exchange, Moctezuma gave Cortez extravagant gifts of gold, silver, and pearls, by some accounts laying intricate necklaces upon Cortez's neck himself. This would be a very sentimental moment for most, but not for Cortez. He did not respect the heathen culture of the Aztecs, regarding it as backwards and savage, and he saw the jewelry given to him personally by their king as nothing more than the gold it was made of. So he had the gold melted down and the pearls de-stringed, and he had the whole lot reforged into a symbol of his faith, an elaborate, extravagant golden cross. Cortez would go on to subjugate the Aztecs and claim the region for Spain. He did so quite quickly, and by 1523 he was appointed interim governor of New Spain, which was accepted as a full-fledged Spanish colony. Cortez then set about Christianizing the local populations, brandishing his personal cross made of Aztec gold the whole time. However, Cortez often faced setbacks, some political, some that could only be described as acts of God. Eventually, Cortez was replaced as ruler of New Spain by Coronado's friend, Viceroy Antonio de Mendoza. It is at this time Cortez would first meet Coronado, and though they would have some initial friction as a result of their respective positions, Cortez would come to respect Coronado and consider him a friend. Then, just before Cortez was set to return to Spain for the last time, he heard of Coronado's expedition and made haste to New Galicia to see his friend before he left. At this meeting, Cortez would be enamored by the story of the 7 cities of gold and would wish Coronado God's grace in finding them. As an extra token of luck and faith, he would give Coronado his personal cross, the one made of Moctezuma's gifts. Coronado would carry this cross with him during his expedition, always keeping it close as a reminder of his mission. He would carry it across the Pinalino Mountains, through the Chihuahuan Desert, across the Rio Grande, and even to the Great Plains. And when Coronado settled into winter quarters in 1541, with his expedition in tatters and failure almost guaranteed, Coronado decided to make one last effort. He took one of the scouting parties, the one that had discovered the Grand Canyon, and decided to lead them personally back to that massive landmark. Traveling on horseback, they reached the Grand Canyon within weeks, and though there was no sign of any cities of gold, Coronado decided to press on. So they crossed the canyon, heading north into what is now Utah, until they reached the site of what we now know as Arches National Park. In this place of natural beauty, with winter's end fast approaching and still no sign of any cities of gold, Coronado would finally break. He falls to his knees in despair, clutching his cross and asking, "Why, God, why? Why has he been cursed with this failure?" And then he realizes, the cross he has been praying to for all this time, it was made with Aztec gold. Cursed gold. That's the reason, he determines. That's why his expedition was doomed to fail. It was the cross. He throws it down in disgust and orders it buried in a nearby cave so it will never see the light of day again. Coronado then leaves to return to his men and lead his expedition back to New Galicia in failure. Hundreds of years pass, and the story of the Cross of Coronado survives, but no one knows where it was buried. Very few of Coronado's scouts returned with him at the end of his expedition, and most of their accounts were lost long ago. But at least one survived, and in that account, the scout reveals that he buried the cross in a cave in the place of many beautiful arches. It's not much, but it's enough for the Portuguese gun runner known as Panama Hat to sponsor an expedition to retrieve it. He hires a man named Garth, also known as Fedora, to go to Arches National Park and lead a small dig, with the express goal of finding any and all of Coronado's treasures possible, with the cross itself being the primary target. It takes some time, but eventually, Garth's dig is successful, and his team recovers the Cross of Coronado. Unfortunately for them, a young Boy Scout by the name of Indiana Jones would be there to witness its discovery, and decided that such a find belonged in a museum. Indy would then steal the cross and lead Garth's gang on a wild chase back to his own home, slipping them several times and only being prevented from successfully liberating the cross by the local sheriff, who said the cross legally belonged to the man who dug it up. Panama Hat would then take possession of the cross and take it into his private collection for the next 26 years. Finally, Indiana would get a tip about the cross's location, and in 1938 he would sneak aboard Panama Hat's gun-running vessel, the Vasquez de Coronado, and steal the cross out from under the old crook, escaping the ship just in the nick of time as a storm knocked loose a large explosive cargo, detonating it and utterly destroying the smuggling ship, killing Panama Hat and sinking the rest of his collection to the bottom of the sea. Maybe that curse wasn't so fake after all. Indiana Jones would then return to Marshall College, where he would turn the cross over to his friend, Marcus Brody, to be placed in the museum's Spanish collection, where it presumably remains to this day. Or at least, that's my interpretation. Like I said, technically this is all speculation. There is no definitive account of the cross's story within the world of Indiana Jones, so we can't be 100% sure that my telling of the story is accurate. However, by combining what we do know of Indy's internal lore with what we know of our own history, I think we've been able to create a reasonable account of what likely happened to the Cross of Coronado. I hope you've all enjoyed the lecture, and I hope you liked this format. I, for one, loved combining fictional lore with historical fact, as it's a blending of two of my favorite obsessions, and scratches the same sort of itch for me as all those alternative history type videos you can find on YouTube. It's really great fun to think about, and a blast to do, so I plan to make more of these types of videos going forward, but I also want to know what you think, so tell me whatever it is in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to like, and if you haven't already, subscribe, so you'll always know where to find your next class in fictional archaeology. As always, I've been Austin, and this has been College of Lore. Thank you for watching.